Winona, but I got enough where I could pronounce it myself. But wherever that is, ways from home tonight, we do appreciate your effort to get up here and see us up here in the hills of Arkansas. Jerry's been doing work with Voice of Truth International since 2007, so he's approaching his second decade, if my math is correct. Many of you guys remember Byron Nichols, who worshiped with us here for years, who I don't know if he was in the initial start of the Voice of Truth International or not, but he did a lot of work there for several years out of Springfield, Missouri. So this is work that Byron had a part in, and we're thankful for all the effort because these efforts do take a lot of effort from the labor, plus also from our congregation's financial support. We continue to support Voice of Truth International, and that's why Jerry comes by and visits with us every couple of years. I believe you were here 2 years ago. So we look forward to hearing an update on the work, and thank you for coming tonight.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Very good to be here with you tonight. And we sort of appreciate so much your help and support of the work with the Voice of Truth. It's a very important work. I doubt you can really understand it being here. But for many people in other countries, I mean, it is a very much loved book. And so I cannot overestimate the importance of it. I got one or two stories I hope to tell you somewhere along the way that kind of give you an idea maybe of the value of printed literature, particularly the Voice of Truth. Of course, there's many other things going on in our work besides just the Voice of Truth. So I'm going to mention some of those other things too. Besides the Voice of Truth, of course, it all fits together. We sponsor many TV and radio programs. We have 34 weekly radio TV programs, all of those in India. These are the ones speaking in the different languages and everything. There's a picture of one of our TV speakers doing some taping. He is actually in the Tamil language, right in the very south part of India. As you might be aware, India right now is a very anti-Christian country. It's the world's largest country as far as population is concerned, but it's also very anti-Christian. Modi is causing most of the problems. He's the prime minister. Back in May, I think, of this year, he was reelected for the third term. We were hoping that he might be defeated. Unfortunately, he was not. The only good thing is his majority is not as much as it was, so maybe that'll prevent him from doing some of the things he would have done. But that makes the TV work even more important because with the TV, at least we're still going directly into the homes of the people. With the culture like it is, it's getting almost impossible to openly evangelize there in India. And so with the TV, though, you're still able to go directly to the people who might be lost. We also, of course, have other programs in other places. We have one weekly radio program in the Philippines. We'll be going to the Philippines on our next trip. In about 3 weeks, we'll go to Vietnam and the Philippines, and maybe we'll be able to start another program or two there in the Philippines. We're not sure on that, but maybe we'll. We have one weekly TV program, Guyana, South America. Louis Rushmore, who is the editor of The Voice of Truth now, he goes to Guyana every February. He was there this year, and he's planning on going back again this next February, so he kind of takes care of that program. We also send 3,000 copies of The Voice of Truth from India, which where we're printed at, straight to Guyana. And so The Voice of Truth is a very loved book in that country as well. We have 3 weekly radio programs in Uganda, 1 weekly radio program in Zimbabwe, and then for the last several years, we've been partially supporting a TV program in Ghana. This is the man speaking on the radio there in Zimbabwe. He gets good response out of that. He also distributes the Voice of Truth for us. We print the Voice of Truth in Zimbabwe in English, 6,000 copies, or no, I think 6,000. 5,000 copies of it goes to Malawi, which is a neighboring country. Shipping has gotten so expensive that it's almost impossible to ship places. And so wherever we can, we try to print it in the various countries. And so that's why we are printing in so many different places. But he's the one that handles all the printing and the distribution of the Voice of Truth there for us. These are the two men who speaks on the radio there in the Philippines. They work together. It's kind of like a dialogue or discussion type of thing. They said his program is one of the more popular programs off his station there on Sunday especially. And so we'll of course, be with him for about a week in November when we get there. And of course, he loves the Voice of Truth as well. We'll mention a little bit more about that in just a moment. This is another man we work with. He doesn't do radio, he does streaming. Of course, streaming a little cheaper. Of course, people can listen to it 24 hours a day doing that, but at least for him, he gets good results. He's getting many contacts and many Bible studies as a result of the streaming. So it seemed to be doing very well. He started 2 brand new congregations earlier this year. So he's always having baptism, seems like. So he usually sends us some pictures. There's one of the pictures. He's sending us some back about a baptism. This is in Uganda. We have 3 weekly radio programs in Uganda. It's on the western side, kind of up in the mountainous area. And so they get good response out of that as well. And so they have baptism about every month. And of course, earlier this year, they started a brand new congregation as a result of the radio programs. And there's a picture of the new group, a new church. Of course, you got a good group there, looks like, to start with there. Yeah, as we're going back to India, of course, as mentioned, India is a very anti-Christian culture. And so they came up with other ways in order to go out in the community. One way they do it is by the use of medical camps. That man right there, he's the son of one of our TV speakers. He's a doctor. His wife is also a doctor, so that fits right into their expertise. And so by using the medical camps, they can go out in community without any problem because the government looks upon that as social work. And if you want to do social work, you can do as much as you want. And so they go out and make the contacts, and then privately they go back and teach them the gospel. They try to do 2 medical camps every month. It's always fairly close to a congregation. So the local preacher, members of that local church, do all the follow-up work. They've had over 57, I think, or 58 medical camps so far. Baptisms, over 150 baptisms altogether. And they use it, and of course started 3 brand new congregations. So it seemed to be working very well there. Of course, the blind work continued to be one of our most important works. There's about 15 million blind people living there in India. And of course, they face some great difficulties, as you might imagine. They try to have 1 or 2 blind camps or blind meetings every month at different places. In these meetings, they do basically 3 things. They have, of course, to preach the gospel to them. They give them little bags of rice that you can see there. Generally, they're very poor, so they really need the help. And then they also give them the literature. They have the Seeker's Bible course as well as the Voice of Truth. What's on the big book on the right, that's the Voice of Truth. And they love the Voice of Truth there as well. You hand those books out and almost immediately you see them taking their fingers and starting to read it. It's amazing to me they can make any sense out of those dots on the page, but they can for them anyway. So they love the literature there. This is a new building. They're just finished. They've had one similar to this about 2 hours away for 3 or 4 years, but this is a brand new one. They're just now finishing it up. And so to house some of the very poor, blind and the widows and so forth. And now they're already in the process of kind of adding a second story onto it. There was about an hour or 2 away from this building, there was another building for the blinds that was run by a member of the church. For some reason, it unexpectedly closed just 3 or 4 months ago. And so naturally, some of those people are coming up there now and asking for help. And so there, of course, you can't turn them away hardly. And so they're trying to maybe add another story and make a little more room for it. They just mentioned just a couple of months ago they had a young girl and her brother come by, didn't even ask for food, they just asking for a place to stay. Said they couldn't go home because their father was abusing to them. And unfortunately in India, that's not that uncommon. And so it's a sad situation in so many places there. This is the blind meetings I have. This is Shane and Emily Fisher right there in the center. They work with us. They are in India right now, probably maybe holding a blind meeting now. I don't know. But somewhere they're in the south part where they work with the blind so much. But one of the things they do, in addition to what we just mentioned, is do a little bit of training. You see the little white bottles they're holding there. That's little bottles of soap or detergent. They mix that up and sell that. Then they also teach them how to do the weaving of the chair bottoms and the baskets there. It's amazing to me how they can do that blind, but they do. And of course, that allows them to at least earn just a little bit of money for themselves and help them out just a little bit there. But those baskets, they're great baskets. I'm sure many of you would love to have some of those baskets here if we could somehow get them over here. But that's kind of difficult to do there. But they do a great job of weaving those baskets, very sturdy and strong baskets. The Voice of Truth, of course, as mentioned, has been a very important part of our work. Right now, counting what we translate in other languages, we estimate we print around 50,000 copies every quarter or so. We print about 8,000 copies of it there in India to be distributed in India and some of the neighboring countries. They can ship fairly reasonable from India to some of the neighboring countries. And so they do that, and that is some shipping that they do there. We also print it in Tanzania. They have a man who translates the Voice of Truth and other books into Swahili, which is the native language there. There's also a lot of English spoken in that area, and so we have both English and Swahili literature being printed there. This is the man, and there's one other man who's not pictured here, who do most of the work translating the literature. We appreciate them so much doing that, because that's a lot of work, as you might expect. A lot of work translating and all of that, and so they're doing a great work there. Great help to the churches in that country and the neighboring countries there. Recently, we helped them go on a campaign. There's the man in the red shirt. He's the one we're talking about. That church building right behind them makes you appreciate what we have here, don't we? Obviously, we don't have any church building even remotely looks like that. But, you know, they have problems over there just as well. There were 3 of them that were supposed to go on this trip together. But shortly before they was ready to leave, one of them got attacked by thieves and beaten, and so obviously he wasn't able to go. The other had a family member die, and he wasn't able to go, so he went on by himself. So, you know, they have problems just like us here from time to time. To give you one story of the value of the Voice of Truth and other books, in Ghana, well, I mentioned Ghana, the man who prints the Voice of Truth there in Ghana for us, back a year or so ago when I went there, his mother-in-law died just about 2 months before I got there. And he told me a story how that about 6 months before that, she had finally been baptized. Now, her husband had been a Christian for a long time, 20 years or so, very active in the church. And, of course, over the years, several family members tried to talk to her, but she just simply wasn't interested. But anyway, about 6 months before she died, she started asking questions and got baptized. And of course, naturally, he asked her, why now? After all of these years, why now? And she pulled out a copy of the Voice of Truth and said, I've been reading the Voice of Truth. He called that the silent evangelism. That little book probably did more evangelism than all the talking they did for 20 years. Now, at some point in time, you still have to have the one-on-one contact. But many times, literature will do the teaching or bring people to a point where they're willing to listen. And that's what it did with her. We got another story similar to that. This was not the Voice of Truth. This was the Church of the Bible, but again, it shows the value of just one little book. The Church of the Bible has been written by J.C. many, many years ago. It's been printed, and these are just some of the languages it's been translated into. There's many more than that, but these are more prominent ones. We have no idea really now how many times it's been reprinted in English. Well up in probably hundreds of thousands of copies been printed in English. It is still by far the most popular book that we have. There was a man a member of the denominational church there in Tanzania. He was the pastor, he said, over 3 districts or 3 regions. And somehow he came in contact with the Church of the Bible. He read that book and he contacted the preacher then, to make a long story short, he was baptized into Christ. Now, you know, I dare say the chances of him personally studying with a preacher on his own would be pretty slim. But he read a book, and that little book convinced him of the truth. And of course, again, you still have to have the one-on-one contact at some point, but that little book brought him to the point where he's willing to listen. So these are just a couple of stories that shows the value of literature, like The Voice of Truth and other books. Many times I think we have underestimated the importance of literature. I know I have. We somehow think, well, nobody reads anymore, and if they'll read a book, they'll talk to me. Well, that's not necessarily true. Sometimes they'll read a book when they would not do anything else. We also print The Voice of Truth and other literature there in Nepal. We don't do it every 3 months. He gets it about done, probably 2 a year. But he also prints some tracts. You know, Nepal is one of those countries, kind of like India. In the past, we've been able to go there in Nepal and do pretty much whatever we wanted to, teaching seminars and things like that. But things looks like they may be changing. Just a few months ago, there was some government official there in Nepal that sent a letter out saying they would no longer allow foreigners to come and teach in seminars and things like that. So again, this shows the value of written literature, though. By the literature, we're helping the native people do the work of evangelizing. They can still do that. That's not a problem. They just don't want foreigners coming in and doing the teaching. And so we're able to help them do the teaching there. We also ship to the places when we can. We are able to ship fairly reasonable to the Philippines. Those boxes you see there, they'll ship for $130, but they'll hold over 300 pounds of literature, so that's quite a bit of literature for that amount of money. And the best thing is they'll come by and pick it up. You don't have to carry it anywhere. That's always good there too. But we do that about every 6 months. The man with the radio program, he gets 2 of those boxes. He loved The Voice of Truth and other books so much, he said 1 box is simply not enough. And so we ship him 2 every 6 months, and I'm sure he's ready for one now, but it's going to be a little while before he gets it. It's almost like Christmas time. We open their box up and seeing what they got there. We also ship to the Caribbean islands. There's a company in Nashville, Tennessee, that ships to all the Caribbean islands, and they like those barrels somehow or another. And so we ship about every 6 months there as well. Back 3 or 4 months ago, we shipped 4 barrels, 1 each to the countries of Grenada, Guyana, Trinidad, and Jamaica. And so you see me smiling there because I finally got it done one more time. That's a pretty good job packing the books in those round. You're putting square pegs in round holes, you know. And so that's a little difficult. You put the boxes in as much as you can, and then you open the boxes up and you put the individual books wherever you can find it, a place to go there. So it takes a little time to do it, but it took me about 4 hours to get those 4 barrels packed there. We also carried some books to the School of Preaching there in Springfield. Matter of fact, that's where we're going to be going Friday. We've got a carload of books right now. Going to take them up there, but Jerry Sullins and his son met us in Jonesboro, Arkansas, back 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we had actually 2 carloads there, and they put it all in that 1 car. And I just talked to Ray this morning, a matter of fact, and they're in Zambia now, and he said they almost had all the literature distributed that they were able to take with them. So wherever we can find containers or people traveling and that sort of thing, you know, we always try to put some literature and with them, and so we're glad to help people out in that particular way. Do a little more teaching online than what I used to. I taught a series of classes back in December for a book of Revelation, about 3 weeks. We taught for a week in Ukraine and Trinidad earlier this year. Yeah, there's still a school of preaching even in Ukraine. Now, these were live. Of course, with the time difference, sometimes that makes it a little difficult. For instance, when I was teaching there in India, I actually started teaching at 10 o'clock at night. So I went from about 10 to nearly midnight or so. And then in Ukraine, most time I started about 5 o'clock in the morning. So you never know what kind of schedule you're going to have sometimes there. We did go to Zimbabwe. You try to every year. We're doing a lot of printing in Zimbabwe as well. As I mentioned, The Voice of Truth is being printed there as well as other books. But one of the things they started this year, this is a brand new work for them, is there's a refugee camp. You see the sign. The man on the left-hand side, he's the director of one of the schools of preaching. Both schools, there's two schools of preaching there. Both of them use our literature extensively in their evangelism program. Well, the man on the left-hand side, he's the director of the old Bible school, been there about 50 years. About 2 hours away from their campus is a refugee camp. And that refugee camp holds about 20,000 people, they said. But of course, since, they're from different areas, they don't speak the native language. They said most of them would speak Swahili or French. And so earlier this year, we started printing some literature in both Swahili and French to be used there in Zimbabwe. Now, of course, you remember we mentioned Swahili being translated back in Tanzania. That started just 4 or 5 years ago. And so you never know what you'll be doing. We never thought we'd be printing out literature for use in Zimbabwe, but you never know sometimes. So, again, the literature will be a great use for the people there as well. As we said, we do print the Voice of Truth there in Zimbabwe in English. We don't do it in other language, but in English we do because most of the people speak some English there. But there's one of the men carrying some of the books. He's actually carrying the Church of the Bible that we mentioned a little bit earlier to be distributed there in the refugee camp. I also do some teaching in some of the Bear Valley Extension schools. As of beginning of this year, they had a little over 60 schools. They got almost 70 schools now. But all those schools together baptized about 4,300 people last year, starting 123 brand new congregations. So it shows the great good that they're doing even while they are in school. I've made 2 trips so far this year. The first one I made was to Uganda back in May. I stopped at 4 different places, which was the arrows you see here. But I learned something, or at least I saw something this time I had never seen before. The people walking down the road there, they are actually members of some Catholic church. And they have the mistaken idea that by walking down the road, going to a particular place in the capital city, that somehow that makes them more spiritual or more holy. Not only that, but you have people from Kenya even crossing the border and walking literally for days to get to that same place. Now, I've seen people in other religions do some of the things like that before, but I never seen any so-called Christians having that idea. It's sad to think that they have the mistaken idea that just walking somewhere, putting yourself through some kind of harm, that's going to make you more holy. Obviously it doesn't, but nevertheless, that's what the people have. But we saw a lot of people walking just like that, literally for days, maybe a couple of weeks in some cases, in order to think they get more holy by doing that. This was our first stop. There's a church, the church there right behind the preacher there. That's a fairly brand new building. They have plans to start holding some seminars and things like that in this area, hoping to help the congregation begin working together a little closer than what they were. In that same area, there was a big rock, and that's what they called it, just simply the rock. The area itself is fairly flat, but all of a sudden, this big high hill just comes up, and you can climb that. It's a fairly difficult climb for a couple of old, out-of-shape preachers. But anyway, we did climb and got a good view at the top there. The man you see there with the back turned to us, he's our driver. He's also director of the School of Preaching there in that country with the Bear Valley School, which was our last stop there. From there, then, we traveled from here over to the left-hand side. Now, you would think there would be a direct route there, and there may be, but they said the bridge was out, so you couldn't go that way. So we had to go south to Kampala, which is the capital city, and then go over, which is a long way around. And it was a hard trip to get there. We left about 6 o'clock in the morning. It was about 8 o'clock at night before we ever got there. It was a long, hard day of traveling there. The white man you see there, he's the preacher for the Strickland Church. He's the one that got me to going into Uganda in the first place. He'd been going to Uganda for many years. And so this is the first time we actually traveled together there, but we had a good trip together. The man right beside of me, the one we're mainly working with, he has a Bible school, and we're sponsoring that Bible school. He had his first graduation this time, and that's why we stopped there. But we were staying at the hotel, and we're staying down in the valley. Around us is the mountains. You see the mountains area right up in here. Well, you see that water running down the street there. That is runoff from the rains from the mountains. Now, you would think they'd have a better drainage system than the runoff water running right down the middle of the street, but that's Africa for you. They do things a little different over there sometimes. A few hours later, it was dry then because all the water finally run off there. But as I said, they had a graduation, had nearly 2,000 people attended the graduation. I mean, I think everybody in the whole area must have come there. But even though you had that many people there, there was almost no cars. Now, can you imagine that? That many people and no cars, almost no bicycles, no motorcycles. I mean, just a very few. Everybody walked. Wherever they go to, everybody walked. And so it's a different experience, that's for sure, in this particular part. But it's not a full-time school. They have about three-week sessions every year. They had 7 people graduated this time. These are the 7 graduates. I had to take a picture of one of them, this little girl. She is not a graduate. She might be a future graduate, I don't know. But that little gown, they fixed that for her. That is not, that was not an adult gown that's dragging the ground. They had fixed it just for her, so she was very cute there. From there, then, I traveled all the way to across the other country, almost to the Kenya border. Talked in a school of preaching there for about a week. This is one of those schools that you might say is a self-supported school. They're, as far as I don't think they have any foreign help right now, so they're just barely getting by, so to speak. They had 13 people there, and normally they would come on a Thursday and Friday, but since I was there, they stayed all week. But they would come there, and when they came, they were figuring on sleeping on the concrete floor. Those mattresses were not there. Those mosquito nets were, but the mattresses were not. And they came there thinking they were going to sleep on a concrete floor. Can you imagine anybody going to a Bible school here for a week knowing you're going to be sleeping on a hard concrete floor? I don't think you'd probably get anybody to come, but they did. But I saw they were sleeping on the concrete floor, and so I thought, well, I can at least help them buy a few mattresses. So I bought 10 mattresses for them, so certainly they were very appreciative of that. From there, then, I went to the south part where we started at. This is where the Bear Valley School of Preaching is at. First time I've been to this school. There's the director of the school again. You remember that same shirt he had on now. That he did not wear that shirt every day. He just happened to have the same shirt on when I took the picture. But there's where the school meets right now. It's a nice building, really a house, but it provides a good place for the students to stay and everything. Got a good view of the countryside there and everything. Of course, there's about, I think, 13 students altogether. They'll be graduating the 2nd in November 2nd. So this will be the 2nd graduating class. So they'll do a lot of good, I'm sure. But you see the projector there. I bought the projector and left there. Of course, knowing I was going to have a projector, I taught the book of Romans for a week. So I fixed up some PowerPoint slides and everything. Well, for 2 days, electricity was off, and so I always saved all that was wasted. So electricity is not too reliable in those countries. That's just a difference in where we live at again. I went to Liberia on my last trip. I was there 4 days. Electricity was off there when I got there, and of two of the 4 days, it was off there. So electricity in these other countries, anytime, they're not too reliable sometimes, but that's just part of it. The last trip was there in August. I spent 2 weeks in Ghana and the last 4 days in Liberia. I've been to Ghana several times before. We print the Voice of Truth in Ghana. I think 5,000 copies of it there. The couple of cute pictures of some little boys there. The little boy on the right looks like he's practicing football, but they don't play football like we do. They play soccer, so that's not what he's doing, but he's just a cute little boy anyway. The one on the left there with the little tire, you know, they don't have toys over there like we do, and so we've seen a number of kids like that to taking an old tire and just rolling it down the street or road, whatever you want to call it. This little boy there's just a little small shop, I guess it was, and I don't know how many times he run around that little building just rolling that little tire round and round. So that's how they do to make fun there. But in addition to teaching for 2 weeks in the school, I also teach in some of the leadership seminars. The purpose of this is simply to encourage the congregation to begin appointing elders. There's a lot of churches in Ghana, Very few have elders, but many of them know that's what God's plan is. And so that's what the purpose is, to try to get them encouraged and start doing that. And so we had 2 this time. I always do it the weekend before and then the middle weekend. So I'm busy the whole time I'm there every single day. This is the first seminar. They had about 100 from about 20 different congregations there. Kind of a disappointing crowd. They were hoping to have a lot more, like they were hoping around 300. But there was a well-known preacher in that area who died, and his funeral was the same day. And of course, funerals are a big thing there in Ghana. And so many of the people who would have attended seminar went to the funeral instead, and I can understand that. But it was taped and put on various social media websites, and so many of the people were able to listen to it online, even though they were not able to be there. This was a little building that church there had built for Bible classes on Sunday. Many churches don't have any Bible classes, but they at least have some there in that little building there. There's the literature distribution center that I mentioned. They, with the Voice of Truth and other literature, they get literature basically all around the country. But one day when I was teaching, those 3 men took that van out and they took several books somewhere. I'm not sure where they went, but they were gone for several hours distributing literature, some of the books, churches and so forth there. Of course, there's some of the books at the various seminars and that we go to, the Voice of Truth you see there. There's the second Sunday, the second church. This was a Sunday morning worship service. This church does have Bible classes, so I took some picture of the Bible classes there. I also got a picture of this young man here. He's blind, but he's just now entering preaching school. Can you imagine a blind person going to a preaching school? It's hard to imagine him doing that, but he's a very dedicated young man, he said. He has some kind of computer that talks to him somehow or another, so I guess that's somehow going to help him get the work done. So, but commend him, appreciate him for his effort to try to go to a Bible school, and even though he has certainly is blind, he cannot do what a lot of people might. This is my class here. I think I had about 13 people from several parts of the country. Many of people traveled several hours. Those 2 men right there in the center, they're actually from Nigeria. And so they travel about 2 days to get there. By the way, we do print the Voice of Truth in Nigeria as well. I think 6,000 copies of it there. And they love the Voice of Truth there. To give you a story how much they do appreciate it, back in the first of the year, we were a little late getting the issue ready. And so he wrote me and said, when is the next issue going to be ready? So what I wrote and said, well, we're running a little late. And as soon as we get it ready, we'll let you know. I guess he didn't believe me because 3 or 4 more times he wrote me before we finally got it done. And then when the next issue came time to that, he was doing the same thing again. So I think if they had what they wanted, I think they'd print it every month. Like I said, the last stop was back in Liberia. We was only there 4 days. We had helped them buy some literature. That big building you see there, that's nothing to do with us. This is the president's house. And I thought you might be interested in just seeing where he lived. Now, the country itself is a very poor country. I guess all the money goes to the politicians. That's generally the way it works, isn't it? But they do things a lot different there. This is a taxi. The man right in the back is, of course, obviously getting a little cheaper route there, cheaper fare. This is also a taxi. The man hanging on the back is actually the one who takes the fare. He sold his seat, and so now he's hanging on the back. He did have a little strap right around his back to kind of help him hold him up there, but as someone said, I guess they don't have any OSHA rules over there. Obviously, they don't. They do things a little bit different over there, as you might expect. Oops. The man right there in the center, the third one, he's the one we're mainly working with. Like I said, we did buy some literature. He's planning, not literature, buy some printing equipment. He's planning on printing some equipment, not just for Liberia, but for 4 neighboring countries as well. He's already printed some for Sierra Leone, I think it was, and they pay for the postage, which is unusual. Many times the churches there expect everything to be given to them, including shipping even, but they did pay for that. So hopefully that's his plans, is to have the churches in other languages, other countries, pay for the shipping. So, they'll do the printing, but they're gonna have to at least pay for the shipping part of it, and I think that's be a way to go there. He also has a radio station, not a radio program, but a radio station. And of course, obviously, when the power was off for 2 days, it was not operating. But the last day I was there, I had about an hour's class lecture there on the radio. So there's a picture of me speaking actually on the radio there. That's what ends up my presentation here. You see, we're always got needs for printing and that sort of thing, because people are always asking for more literature and the Voice of Truth and other things like that. So we certainly do appreciate your help on that. As we mentioned, our next trip is, we're leaving about 3 weeks, going to spend a week or so in Vietnam, and then about 3 weeks or so in the Philippines. My wife is going with me on this one. This has been about 2 years since she was able to travel. Last year, she had 2 ankle surgeries on the same ankle. So she's been down for a little while there, but so she's kind of excited to be able to go back again. So does anyone have any question before we turn it back over to Brother Johnson?
I think you're doing a wonderful job, and it touches my heart to see that.
Well, thank you.
Because like you say, in America, they're indifferent. Like, hey, they're hungry for it. I don't know if it's so good. First Sunday we have, last Sunday first.
Yep. Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you.